This photo is horrible. I mean, there is just too much noise and everything looks just so flat. So because of the noise, you might think that the ISO on this one was around 2000, 3000, or maybe even more. But what if I told you that the ISO on this photo is 300? And it's the same story here. This photo was shot at 200, this one at 400, and this last one was actually shot at the base ISO, which is 100. That's the lowest ISO I can go on the camera. And yet every single one of them is unusable and bad. So what went wrong? Wasn't I supposed to get really clean and sharp photos when shooting with low ISOs? I mean, this is what everybody tells you, to keep your ISO as low as possible when taking photos with a camera, right? However, the truth is very far from this. Shooting with low ISO is actually the biggest lie in photography. In fact, if your photos always look flat and noisy, no matter what light you shoot in, chances are that you are shooting with low ISOs. So in this video, I will show you why shooting with low ISO is a bad idea and how in fact professional photographers use ISO to take better photos. And also stick till the end, because in the end I will show you how you can get the perfect ISO every time with just one setting. Now, as you start taking photos with a camera and start learning the basics of photography, there is one thing that everybody would tell you, which is to keep your ISO as low as possible when taking a photo. In fact, they would tell you that higher ISO actually creates noise in your photos, and this noise only increases and becomes worse when you increase the ISO number. But this is all wrong. It's a complete lie. You see, ISO does not create noise in your photos. It simply can't. It's physically impossible because the noise is already there before you even take a photo. Confused? Let's see. When light enters a camera through a camera sensor, it is converted into a digital signal. This signal then passes through an electrical circuit and finally becomes a photo. Now, within that electrical circuit, magic happens. You see, the image processing software in the camera thinks that the light in the real world is just not enough. It cannot be relied upon. So, it always gives you an option to add a bit more light in your photo. And it does this by amplifying this digital signal, or in simple words, adding a gain to that signal. Now, that's a digital signal, right? So it also has some electrical and heating noise. So if you amplify the digital signal too much, you also increase that noise too much. And if you amplify that digital signal by a small factor, then you get less noise. But the problem is noise is always there. Now, all of this created a problem in digital photography, right? Because now we need a way to measure how much light we are getting in the camera sensor versus how much noise we are producing at the other end in the electrical circuit. In digital photography, it is actually the signal to noise ratio, which means it is a ratio between the light entering the camera sensor versus the digital noise created in the electrical circuit of that camera, right? So you can see that ISO cannot create noise in the photo because noise was already present in the photo even before you took it because of the electrical circuit. Now, the International Standards Organization says that an excellent photo should have a signal to noise ratio of 40:1, and an acceptable image should have a signal to noise ratio of at least 10:1. This means that we need to have really good exposure in our photos to have really good signal to noise ratio, right? So this means that if you are using high ISO, it's simply because you don't have enough exposure in your photos are underexposed, or your photos were already very noisy in the beginning, right? And the higher ISO simply reveals that noise, right? Now, getting a good exposure is not a problem if you have really good light. Then you can turn down your shutter speed or use a higher aperture and still get a very good photo. But that's not always the case. Sometimes you simply don't have enough light. Or maybe you are a wildlife photographer and you simply have to shoot at faster shutter speeds, right, to freeze motion. Or you are a portrait photographer and you have to shoot at lower apertures to get nice blurry backgrounds behind your subjects. In that case, you cannot touch shutter speed or aperture. In that case, your only option is to increase ISO. Now, this means you have two options. Either you can increase the ISO before taking a photo, or you can take an underexposed photo and then increase the exposure in post-production. So, which is better? You see, when you take an underexposed photo with low ISO and increase exposure in post-production, you are basically amplifying the digital signal, right? This means you are also amplifying the noise in that signal again, right? Which means you will have a really, really noisy photo because you are simply revealing the noise in that underexposed photo from the start. In contrast, if you increase the ISO before taking a photo, you're simply amplifying the analog signal or light. And analog signals actually amplify very easily and they still save a lot of details and highlights. Whereas digital signals lose a lot of details when getting amplified. This means that increasing the ISO before taking a photo will give you better results than taking an underexposed photo and adding exposure on top of it. Let's take these two photos for example. The photo on the left has been shot with higher ISO, while the photo on the right has been shot with lower ISO. It was underexposed and then some exposure was added in post-production. And you can see the difference. We have much more details on left as compared to right hand side. Also, there is much less noise on left as compared to the right hand side. Overall, the photo on the left looks much more cleaner and sharp as compared to the photo on the right. Now, let's say you still get a noisy photo after trying all of this. So in that case, there are certain things that you can do while editing a noisy photo so that you can still get a good result. Firstly, don't crop the noisy photo too much because if you crop it more, you will reveal much more noise and it will become much more worse. Secondly, you can also use some noise reduction softwares or denoising tools, right? Now, there are a lot of softwares to choose from, and frankly, a lot of them are expensive. But I personally find this denoise tool from Lightroom very easy to use and it gives me really good results. You can see the difference between the photo on the left and right. Now, as promised, I have a bonus tip in the end which will allow you to get perfect ISO almost every time in any lighting conditions. And it is this. Simply use the auto ISO function in your camera. This function will allow you to completely focus on setting the aperture and shutter speed, and then the camera will select an ISO value which it thinks will give you the perfect exposure. This means you don't even have to think about anything that we just discussed. You don't even have to care about any nitty-gritties, what the electrical circuit does, why ISO exists and all that. You can simply go ahead and take a photo. And believe me, a lot of professional photographers actually do that because they simply don't have enough time to think about this. Now, there's also creative side to it. You see, some photographers actually prefer to have some noise in their photos because this makes their photos look way more cinematic and also goes back to those nostalgic times when film photography was done. So it makes your photos look like they were shot on a film camera. So it's up to you to decide if you want to have noise in your photos for that cinematic feel or you want to reduce that noise and then follow all the steps that we just discussed in this video. So do you still think that shooting in higher ISO is a problem and you would rather increase exposure in post-production? What would you prefer to do? Also, if this video was helpful to you, please consider subscribing to the channel and giving this video a thumbs up because I keep creating more content like this on this channel. I hope that you enjoy photography, you enjoy taking photos. I really wish you a really nice day and week ahead. See you next time.